Okay, right. We'll just get started then. So, hi, I'm Daniel.
And I'm Eva.
And we're Reading Ambassadors. We're here to talk to Mrs Gardner, Deputy Head of Angus Virtual Schools, about books, ebooks and audiobooks, and her love of reading. This interview is for the library's Prêt radio podcast, which you can find on YouTube. So, Mrs Gardner, it's lovely to have you here. And you are, as I said, the Deputy Head of the award-winning Angus Virtual School. And I understand your main focus is literacy. So can you briefly tell the listeners about some of your work and what you do?
I am happy to do that, thank you. So, my job as Deputy Head of the Virtual School includes lots of really interesting things to do with schools. But, yes, you're right, a main focus of my job is literacy. And I lead a literacy champions network. So all of our primary schools have someone who has identified themselves as the literacy champion, and I have regular meetings with those champions, and we talk about the development of literacy in primary schools. I also link with the secondary schools and the principal teachers of English, and I'm very lucky in that I get to attend national literacy network meetings, so I have an idea of what's going on nationally with regard to literacy. So it's part of my job. It's not the whole job, but it's a really important aspect of it.
Yeah, definitely.
Oh, okay. So am I correct in saying you trained as an English teacher? Most people seem to get the importance of studying English and say history, but less people understand the impact poor literacy has on subjects like science, computing and even maths. What are your thoughts on this?
Yes, you're right. I am an English teacher to trade. I started teaching English in 1987, so I'm quite ancient now. I'm an old woman. And I think that we've done a lot of work in recent years to really understand the importance of literacy.
Yeah.
So, of course, people will usually associate it with the English department, but with projects like the Reading Schools Award, for example, that's a really important national programme. Projects like that have helped all teachers to understand just how important literacy is in every single subject.
Yeah.
And you guys obviously know already, you're reading ambassadors,
Yeah.
You've thought about this. You will know that the ability to read and write unlocks the whole curriculum.
100%.
Yes.
Yes. So if you have problems in literacy, it's very, very difficult then to access every subject in the curriculum. But actually, it's bigger and wider than that. And I am very fond of telling anyone who will listen that improved literacy means improved life chances.
Yeah.
So it's actually bigger than achieving qualifications
Yeah.
and success in school. It's about achieving success in life. And there's so much research into the benefits of reading. Massive amounts of research that point to the fact that people who read can be less lonely. People who read have more emotional intelligence and more empathy for other people.
Yeah.
People who read are more likely to be able to express themselves and be happier as a result. And I could harp on about this forever, but you don't have forever to listen to me. It's massively important, and anything that we can do to encourage people to read, to encourage everyone, and not just children in school, everyone to read more, is helping them to lead a more fulfilled life, actually.
Yeah,
but in a school, it's hugely important.
It is. It really is.
That's a great way of putting it.
So, you clearly have a very big passion for books, and rightfully so. Have you always been a big reader since you were, young?
Yes, I have.
Did you have a favourite book then, or favourite author when you were
Yeah,
young?
well, I remember in P4 in P4 I won a prize. Can't remember what it was for, but the prize was my first book without any pictures, and it was a book called Heidi by Joanna Spyri.
Yeah, I think I've read that.
And it was the first book that I read from cover to cover without stopping.
Wow.
And I was quite young when I did that. And I remember being proud of myself that it was a book without pictures, and also that I read it without stopping. I was so engrossed in it, and I'd gone off to, I was tucked up in bed, read it, and it must have been the early hours in the morning when I finished it. And I remember it so clearly. I remember that feeling of being absolutely lost in another world and lost in the life of another character. It's fantastic.
It is great when you get a book
and I've
like
still
that.
got a copy of that book. I still own a copy of it.
Excellent.
Amazing. So, what do you think adults modelling reading for pleasure is so important for our families? And what role do libraries play in this, especially during a cost of living crisis?
Gosh, there's a lot in that question. So, first of all, libraries are hugely important. They will always be important, because a space in which to access books is a space where the expertise exists. So librarians are so important in terms of encouraging people to read, advising them on suitable reading material, helping them to explore their reading tastes and so on. So they are really, really important. I guess that whole having access to books is so massively important. Massively important. And one of the ways that we access books is through the adults in our lives. So access to reading starts so young, and modelling reading and a love of reading starts really early, hopefully. So you're never too young and you're never too old to have someone read to you.
I agree.
And I remember talking at a Brecon High School event to do with your Prêt programme. I talked about the fact that, at the end of his life, my father wasn't able to read because he wasn't well enough, and I read to him. And you're not too old to be read to. So I guess the point I'm making, and I went off point, is that that very start of children's reading journeys is important. And having an adult who will just share the love of reading and make it an interactive process is really important. And then as we get older, adults in our lives help us to access books. And they help us to see that reading is something that is about leisure, it's about pleasure. And so families where there is that access to books is really, really important. And when I talk to newly qualified teachers, regardless of their subject, I encourage them to talk about reading in school and to share the books that they love, and also to share their books. I can remember a couple of my teachers lending me their own books and feeling how privileged I was to have the access to their own reading material. So I think the more that adults talk about reading, show that they love reading, the more it kind of infects young people. And that's an infection that you want to get. It is infectious. Any sort of enthusiasm is infectious, and it's really important.
Yeah, I agree, definitely. So, do you have a favourite book, comic, of all time, and why do you like that so much?
So I was talking to my colleagues this morning about the fact that I was going to be interviewed, and I find it really difficult to identify a favourite book, but there is one book that I read every year. I reread it every year. So in the run-up to Christmas, I often get exasperated with all the preparations, and I get a bit fed up with it all, the shopping and the wrapping and all that carry on.
Yeah,
But
understandable.
but I make a point of rereading Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol in the run up to Christmas. And it doesn't take long to read, but it really does give me back that sort of Christmas sparkle.
Yeah.
It reminds me of all the good things about Christmas, and the good things are about human connection, about enjoying your family and your friends, about the fact that human beings can change and change for the better. So I've done that, I think, for the last, I think at least 15 years.
Wow.
And I do it every single year. So I guess that's the closest I have to a favourite book.
Yeah.
Okay.
Excellent.
So, do you have a favourite author, and why? Is it the storytelling, or the characters, or the subject matter?
I have lots of favourite authors, but I suppose if I had to come up with one, I'd probably say Thomas Hardy,
Right.
Okay.
and that's because reading his novels reminds me of being at university. It reminds me of a happy time in my life.
Okay, yeah.
I also think they are just so wonderfully written, especially in terms of the characterization, but also that description of the world in which the characters live, so beautifully described. I've always just really enjoyed them, and I will occasionally reread a Thomas Hardy novel
Yeah.
just to take me back there. And the films of the novels over the years have kind of stayed very true to the novels, which I think is pleasing.
Really good, yeah.
But I read so many things. I've got so many favourite authors.
Yeah.
I was making my colleagues laugh today because I was talking about the fact that I'll even read cookbooks. In bed when I'm reading, I'll read a cookbook.
Yeah.
You know, I love Nigella Lawson's cookbooks because they're so beautifully written.
Yeah, they are.
Nigel Slater's cookbooks, I'll read them as well. So I'll read almost anything, and I've got lots of favourites, I have to say.
Yeah.
Lots of favourites.
Yeah, on the topic of other genres, do you have any favourite comic book artists?
Do you know what? Comic books have never been my thing.
No?
Yeah. Fair enough. I suppose it's
Yeah.
different for everyone, and
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
it's a very different genre of book, and I suppose it may not
Yeah.
be with the pictures and whatnot. It maybe doesn't
Yeah.
engross you as much as
Yeah.
a normal book might possibly.
Not like
Yeah.
a novel would
But-
be.
Yeah. Well, we can see
Yeah.
that you very much have a wide variety
Yeah.
of favourite books. So the question is, what are you currently
Yeah.
reading?
So just now I'm reading the Fry Chronicles by Stephen Fry.
Oh yeah.
I like to alternate between fiction and non-fiction.
Okay.
I've always done that, and I found myself fascinated by people who are related to comedy. So I've read almost every autobiography written by a comedian,
Okay.
and I'm reading Stephen Fry's just now,
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
and I just find them utterly fascinating. So I've read the likes of Frankie Boyle, Alan Carr, Graham Norton. Lots and lots of comedians have written autobiographies, and I do really enjoy finding out what makes them tick, understanding where they've come from and how they have got into the world of comedy. And Stephen Fry's writing is so beautiful. He's so clever and so witty, and I'm thoroughly enjoying that just now.
I can imagine. Yeah,
Oh,
I do
that's
really
really
like
cool.
Stephen Fry.
Do you
Oh,
have
he's amazing. I do
Yes,
love
yeah.
him.
Yeah.
do you have a preferred genre, or well you've already said that you'll read any genre, so pretty much. So which is your favourite then, if you have a preferred one?
I don't think I have a preferred one. I tend to binge on a genre at a time.
Yeah. Okay.
So I'll maybe I'll maybe go through an historical period where the non-fiction that I'm reading is very history based. So for a while I read a lot about Russian history because that was what was interesting me at that moment.
Yeah, okay.
I do like police crime novels.
Yeah, gritty stuff, yeah.
So I've read a good lot of them. So yeah, it just depends on the mood that I'm in. I'll move from genre to genre. And read a whole lot of books in that genre before I get a bit bored, and then I'll move on to something else.
Yeah, that's quite a good way to be.
What's your opinion on ebooks and audiobooks? Do you think they're as good as paper books, or do you think listening to a book would be considered cheating?
I don't think it's cheating at all, actually. I think it's important to access reading material in a way that suits you best. I love my ebook. I use it a lot. It saves my suitcase being full of books if I'm going on holiday.
That's good, yeah.
It's easier just to pick it up and take it with you. So I'm not in the least bit snobbish about that. And audiobooks, again, they're so useful. You know, you think of people who are busy doing something else but enjoy listening to a book at the same time.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. And as an English teacher, I used audiobooks in the classroom.
Yeah, okay.
Actually, and young people really enjoyed listening to novels. So I don't think we can afford to be snobbish about it at all. Electronic devices have developed in all sorts of different aspects of our world, and to resist technological change is a bit silly. We have to accept that things develop, they move on, and it's best to embrace it.
What's your opinion then on the Sora reading app that we have in school? Do you think it's useful as well, having that access at your fingertips for pretty much any book, just on a phone, a laptop, or whatever device?
Or the Chromebooks we have at school.
Yeah, or the Chromebooks we have.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's fantastic. I think it's really good.
Yeah, definitely.
Really good. I mean, there's always a place for your traditional book, and my house is full of them, and I'm not very good at throwing them away or handing them into charity. I love the fact that I've got lots of actual books, but at the same time, having that electronic access is fantastic. It's amazing. If I think about me as a child, if someone had said, one day you'll be able to read in this way, it would have been mind-blowing to me. Again, it shows how old I am. But I think it's fabulous that young people have all that choice now. And why shouldn't they? And why shouldn't they take advantage of it and enjoy it in that way?
Yes.
I agree, yeah.
So this is another one of those questions that give or takes between people. Do you always finish a book even if you hate it?
Again, I was talking to my colleagues about this, and we were really debating it.
Yeah.
I feel obliged to finish every book I start.
Okay. Yeah.
And I'm going to be really controversial here. The only time I failed to finish a book was Tolkien's The Hobbit.
Right.
It wasn't for me. And that was a long time ago, and one day I will try it again, but I just thought, no, this isn't my genre, this isn't my cup of tea, and I didn't finish it. But I feel like I caved too early. But that's the only example I can think of a book where I abandoned it. And it's an unresolved issue, so I need to go back to The Hobbit and give The Hobbit another go, because I'm aware of the extent to which that book is loved, is adored by millions of people. So I really do have to try again there.
Indeed. And our final question is, who is the most interesting author you've ever met?
I haven't met be a literacy staff tutor, and I would get to take authors around the secondary schools as part of the Angus Book Award.
Oh yeah.
And one of them, a man called Keith Gray, who won the Angus Book Award a couple of years, I really liked him. He was such a personable guy, but he was so good at talking to young people in schools. That's what I really admired about him. That the minute he crossed the threshold of a school, he seemed to make that instant connection with young people. He was so enthusiastic and so funny and so entertaining. He was an impressive person, and I enjoyed being in his company.
Amazing, fantastic.
Yes.
Wow,
Well,
that's cool.
thank you so much for letting us interview you
thank
today.
you.
That's all the questions we have. Is there any closing points you'd like to make? Anything you'd like to say at all, or are you happy?
No, other than thank you so much for giving me an excuse to talk about reading. That's always a pleasure.
Thank you for letting us talk about
And
it.
it was lovely to meet you. So
you,
lovely to meet
and
you.
you.
And I wish you all the very best in the future, guys.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much. Thank you very much. Excellent. Right,
Right.
there we go. Stop that. Thank you very much. That
Yes,
was excellent.
thank you.
You're very welcome.
Thank you, Vicky. Thank you very much for doing that. It's much
Not at all. That
appreciated.
was an absolute